All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Facebook Live on our Moms Clean Air Force page. I am Molly Michael. I'm the Southeast Pennsylvania organizer for Moms Clean Air Force. I'm here today with State Representative Elizabeth Fiedler. She represents the 184th District in the state of Pennsylvania. She's also my elected official in the State House. And so I'm happy to be here in South Philly at her office today to talk about her priorities for climate action, what motivates her, and what she has, what she's been working on in Harrisburg. So first, I want to ask this question because you're a mom, I'm a mom, and I know when I found out you were running for office, I really was so interested to hear what your story was and why you decided to initially, step into this space. You were a reporter for WHYY here in Philadelphia for 10 years. And then you made this kind of a really fascinating, laudable decision. So I just want to hear about how this all came to be.
Sure. So I worked as a reporter for WHYY and NPR for 11 years, and I loved it. I covered politics, healthcare, community development. It was a really great chance to learn a lot about policy, but also talk with a lot of people about what they were struggling with, what they were happy with in their neighborhood, what they wanted their elected officials to be working on that they were not working on. Mm-hmm. And it was a great job. And then after 11 years, I really felt like I needed to be directly involved in shaping the kind of world I want us to live in now, but that I also want for future generations. So, as you know, I have two little kids. They are now 2 and 4, and when I announced that I was running, they were 3 months old and almost 3.
And there's this great picture of you at your announcement with your youngest strapped to the carrier on your chest, which, at Moms Clean Air Force, we are motivated by our children, and so I assume that had something to do with it for you.
It did, and I actually remember very clearly my husband and I had a discussion the morning of the announcement, and it was about who was going to wear Lewis, who was 3 months old. Who was going to strap on the baby carrier, and I said, I can do it. Like, I can make the announcement with him in the carrier. Mm-hmm.
Here we are.
Of course I can do it. I had attended a lot of meetings and continued to attend a lot of meetings with him. So it was, he was always present and always a really good reminder for me that while the jump into politics and to, this entire world of electoral work and of legislative work could feel intimidating at times. Right. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about me at all. I was just helping. I was in service of a vision. I was carrying out work that would move us toward the kind of country that we deserve and the kind of state and city that we deserve and that we want for our kids. And so, while I could personally be nervous about something, going to speak before people or even jump, I have all this stuff now and it has my face on it. Like, that's a lot as a regular person, as a mom. That's a lot to get used to. Mm-hmm. Well, there could be stuff like that I might be a little nervous about, or speaking before large groups of people. Mm-hmm. It was all in service to this larger vision, and it's because I want our kids to have a future.
Yeah. So that's sort of the perfect pivot to talk a little bit about your priorities on climate action mm-hmm. and fighting air pollution and that sort of thing, because we are looking at a future. And as parents, it's what are my kids' lives going to be like in 2050 when my oldest is 41? How younger than I am now. How does your I know climate action is a priority for you. What is your vision for a future, and what do you see as really attainable climate action that both individuals can do, and both what you're trying to do mm-hmm. and what you're trying to do in Harrisburg?
Thank you for that. I want to be part of building the kind of society, the kind of economy that we need on an environmental front and that we deserve. So one in which there are jobs in the solar industry, in the wind turbine industry, and retrofitting all of our public buildings, including our public schools, so that we are using less energy. Mm-hmm. And one that really prioritizes both impacted communities, people who are near some of these production sites, mm-hmm. some of the most vulnerable people in our neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. Poor people, people of color, people from immigrant communities are often disproportionately impacted by pollution, air and water pollution. And also really prioritizing working with labor unions. I'm a strong supporter of labor unions. I think that they are the reason that's what built the middle class. That's one of the strongest ways that we as workers can make sure that we have good health care, that we have pensions, that we have safe working conditions. And so I really think that this is a tremendous opportunity to bring those things together to make sure that we have jobs, that they are unionized, that they pay people a living wage so they can pay their bills, and so we have an environmental future on this planet. And we are not, we're not moving in the direction that I would hope that we would be.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the point, just to put a really fine point on what you're saying too, is that we do not have to trade off, we don't have to sacrifice our environment in the service of our economy. That these two things do work together. And at Moms, we don't talk a ton about jobs, but it really is about sustaining your family, right?
Yes.
And that a just transition and a clean energy future will be family sustaining and economy sustaining. So I want you to talk a little bit specifically about our district, your district here in South Philadelphia. It's my neighborhood, it's your neighborhood. You mentioned a little bit about environmental issues disproportionately impacting immigrants, communities of color, poor communities. Can you talk about how that intersects with your district and the people you represent here in Philadelphia?
Sure, definitely. So in South Philly, like in some other parts of the state and country, but in South Philly in particular, we have a very high rate of asthma, in particular among children. We are surrounded by interstates, we are surrounded by manufacturing. We know that those things produce the sorts of chemicals and air pollution that results in asthma, and that makes it harder to breathe if you already have some sort of respiratory challenges. So asthma is one of the things that we hear a lot about, that I talk with parents about, because they ask how we can help on that front, why they know so many children who are struggling with asthma, and it doesn't seem like it's getting better. So the air quality is definitely one very directly. We've been working really hard on getting funding for our school buildings so that they can have the heating and air conditioning systems they need, and so they cannot have lead and asbestos and rodents, right? I mean, it seems ridiculous that that's even something that exists.
Yes.
In our schools.
Absolutely. Those are the safe spaces that we want to send them in. And so outdoor air quality and indoor air quality is a huge concern in Philadelphia. So let's talk about Harrisburg. What's happening now? I want to tell everyone watching, Representative Fiedler is on the Energy and Environmental Resources Committee in the State House. So she, along with some other really great, fierce moms who are fighting for our kids' future. So I just want to talk about some of the priorities you have there, what you're working on in the State House, specific policies or more general things that you're trying to change.
Sure.
There.
So I have a piece, I'm very honored to serve on the Environmental Resources Committee. It is an interesting place. We have a member of that committee who does not, more than one, who does not believe that climate change is real.
That's a struggle.
It is a struggle. Who believes we need to burn more fossil fuels, that we need to accelerate it. So that's a starting point, and that can feel challenging. And at the same time, hearing other folks say that in committee only makes it feel more important to me to be there and to be speaking out for all the things that we're talking about. So I have a piece of legislation that would increase the tipping fee for municipal waste. So Pennsylvania imports a tremendous amount of trash from New Jersey and New York because it's so cheap to dump it here. So I have a bill to raise it from $4 to $8 a ton, which is not the solution, but it is one way to make sure our state is full of less trash.
Right.
But that bill is part of Zero Waste PA, which is a larger effort to reduce the amount of trash that we produce and to be more productive with the things that we do. So creating composting programs, reducing styrofoam, reducing or eliminating plastic bags, things like that really, here in South Philly, walking to my office from my house, I see both styrofoam and plastic bags often blowing like tumbleweeds.
The tumbleweeds. I know, we love our city, but we do have a lot of waste, a lot of trash kind of floating in our streets.
It happens. So those are some concrete things that we can do, and also making it easier for people to recycle and to reduce the amount of waste is something that we are working on. So improving the ability to buy in bulk or buy from some of these stores that offer, you can bring your own container and refill it, whether it's peanut butter or something like that. That's how we're going to reduce the amount of recyclables that we produce that we know are not, recyclables used to be monetarily valuable, and that's not so much the case.
Right. I mean, and it is reduce, reuse, recycle.
Right.
We seem to have, we're missing that
The
reduce
first
and
part.
reuse these days for a sustainable future. I do think that's so important, and I love that piece of legislation. I'm so glad it's out there in the world. Do you also? I want to just ask you a little bit about the 100% renewable energy legislation that you are on, that just got its 100th co-sponsor. It's bipartisan legislation in the state of Pennsylvania. There's a bill in the Senate and the House that has been introduced. Could you talk a little bit about that, because it does move us into that clean energy, renewable energy world and space that I think we all want to go to.
It does, and I was so excited to see the 100th sponsor, and as you said, it is bipartisan, and the 100th sponsor is a Republican member of the House. So I think that we need that. We need a bold vision and an actual path forward, and that legislation is part of it. So I'm excited to see so many people getting on board with it. I remember in the early days questions about whether it could get a much lower number of co-sponsors, and now that we see 100, it's awesome. So it provides us a sort of path forward that we need to achieve some of these ambitious energy goals and job creation, because we have kids. A lot of people worry about how they're going to put food on the table, and in many cases are struggling so much that they're only able to think about this week, this month, right? Of course they care about the planet. Of course they want their own kids to be able to have a future, but I think it's really our responsibility as elected officials to work on legislation like this that will offer a path forward, both for Republicans and Democrats, for everyone. So I think it's a great piece of legislation. I think that Rep. Rabb and Senator Killian have been doing a really great job, and I am excited to see where we can go with it this fall.
I know, because you're going back into session soon, right?
We are right after Labor Day.
Yes.
I'm very excited.
I know. Well, I have one final question, because one of the things we do at Moms Clean Air Force is to really talk to people, meet them where they are, figure out what they need in terms of learning how to be advocates, and also educating them about the fact that the State House in Harrisburg is their house, right? You call it the People's House a lot, which is one of my favorite things. I heard a congressman in D.C. in July, a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania, refer to it as the People's House. This is your house, the Capitol, in D.C. as well. So how do you encourage, and what would you recommend your constituents around the country, because we're talking to a national audience here on our Facebook live feed, what is the most effective way? What can we do? How do we own this climate action movement as parents, as elected officials, as constituents?
Great question. Because that's how we win, is if we get everyone involved. We need pressure both from the inside of some of these legislative houses and also from the outside, from constituents. And a lot of, I think it's good when elected officials receive phone calls, emails, office visits from constituents. That's why we're there, is to represent people. And so it's often, I think, a very good reality check for people when we're inside some of those really fancy places that have even elaborate ceilings.
Yes.
So whether it's on the federal level or the state or the city, do your research as much as you can. Figure out what the important issues are. So whether it's renewable energy goals like in the State House or something on the federal level, figure out what issue is important to you, figure out the legislation, and then find out where your lawmaker stands on it. And if you're happy with where they stand, call them and say, thank you so much for supporting that. That's really important to me. I live in your district.
Right.
And if you're not happy about it, then do that and tell 5 or 10 of your friends and neighbors to do the same thing. I think really being directly, don't be hesitant to pick up the phone or to send an email. These are your elected representatives. They may have the title in front of their name, but it's only because they were elected to be there. So don't be hesitant about that. And I love when people come to the State House. Come to the State House, come for a rally, come for a tour, just to visit. I think it's exciting to have that kind of energy in there. And I'm always happy to host people who want to come to the State House.
Tour the House floor, fun things like that. Well,
definitely.
I do think when people who are able to show up at the State House show up, it can be very powerful. And what I also notice is it's not just people who are with us on climate action who pay attention. Mm-hmm. It's people who are like, is this a real thing? And so I think the more we can generate that kind of movement around it, to put even more pressure on people who maybe are not necessarily as interested in acting on climate or think we should burn more fossil fuels. And we're in an oil and gas state, Pennsylvania is. It's a very, so it can be a very sort of tricky issue to move forward, particularly with a lot of things on climate and better protections from, natural gas pollution and all of the things that we think is important. Well, I think that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's such an honor to come to talk to my elected official in my neighborhood about issues that are important to us. So this is Representative Elizabeth Fiedler from the 184th District in Pennsylvania. Thanks so much for listening and watching today.